Welcome to the seventh edition of CenterView, our monthly virtual discussion series sponsored by Baltimore's oldest and preeminent business networking and dining club, the Center Club. Our aim is to feature the people, the issues that are impacting our present and of course shaping our future, as well as the movers and doers from across our region who are creating momentum and making a positive difference, those who have something important to say about the issues that we confront. I'm your host, Greg Tucker. I'm a Baltimore City resident and member of the Center Club. I'm also honored to be a board member of the Center Club, Baltimore City resident since 1997. I'm a communications advisor, but I love doing this and creating this discussion format for the members of the club and a broader audience as well. Today, we're going to take a close look at the impact and consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly on the youngest, our children, many of whom have been displaced from their learning environments due to restrictions on capacity at early childhood care schools and facilities, as well as so many parents being out of work and unable to afford the cost of childcare. The fact is the impact on preschool and preschool age children, as well as children in elementary school, even high school, is severe and perhaps long lasting. Today, we're going to discuss these factors and how to mitigate the long-term consequences with two experts in the field of early childhood care and behavioral health. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome Richard Huffman, who is the founder and CEO of Celebree Schools. Rich operates some 26 early childhood schools, 24 here in Maryland, 2 in Delaware, in addition to 25 franchise schools, either already open or under development in New Jersey, New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Ohio, all of which will operate under the Celebree brand. Rich is joined by Dr. Corneliu Sanda, who is the chair of the Department of Psychiatry and director of Behavioral Health Service line at MedStar Franklin Square Medical Center. Gentlemen, thanks so much for lending your time, your insights, and expertise as we discuss this critical issue that continues given the ongoing threat of the coronavirus and the fact that early childhood care facilities are still not operating at full capacity. You've both been dealing with the effects of learning displacement on young children, something that's been featured prominently in the news and increasingly, I might add. But first, let me ask you how it is that how it was that you became focused on early childhood education and behavioral care. So Rich, let me turn it over to you first.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. So sure. My parents introduced me to early education back in the mid-'80s. So my parents owned and operated a preschool, and so back then it was described as daycare, and it was a place where children went because mom and dad needed to go to work. And so I had my opportunity in 1994 to open my own preschool, Celebree. It was 27 years ago. Opened my first school in Howard County, and so many great things have happened over the last 26 years, and I think especially here in Maryland, I think has really led the way in early education and improving the way that we go about early childhood development. Right.
Dr. Sanda?
Thank you, Greg, for having me as well, and thank you for putting this together. What preoccupied me about medicine in general and mental health in particular is the disparity in the quality of care that people receive based on their socioeconomic status, their race and gender. And while this is true for every specialty in medicine, it certainly is exacerbating in mental health, in addition to the stigma that people with mental health have to deal with. We now know that mental illness has the same biological underpinning as any other general illnesses, and yet people continue to think about it differently. Furthermore, I have a subspecialty in addiction, which is kind of introducing a third layer of stigma, if you want, which is just as unjustified. As we know now, the addiction too has a biological substrate, and unfortunately our treatments are very inefficient. When it comes to children, it's a particularly sensitive topic because they are powerless, really. They rely on their parents to recognize when they need help and to get them that help when they need it. And this has become increasingly challenging now during the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, we'll get into a lot more of that and get your very keen perspective. Let me. I think it's good to set a baseline and making sure we all understand what's carried out in these programs now. To your point, it's not just sort of babysitting. Rich, I'm going to ask you, given the given our focus is on the impact of this socialization disruption, as I'll call it, particularly on young children, it's probably good to get a sense of what quality childcare is, licensed childcare programs are, versus, again, being perceived as something like expensive babysitting. There are real structured programs, even for very young children, 2 and 3 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we know, I mean, infants through 5 years old are the most critical years because 90% of a child's brain is already developed by the age of 5. So there's been a huge focus on early education, especially here in Maryland, as we really lead the way with lower group sizes and teacher ratios. And Maryland has some of the highest teacher qualification standards. This is not a entry-level position coming into preschools. And we also have state-approved curriculums that we follow that helps with getting these children successfully ready to enter into kindergarten. So we've come a long way.
Right. Dr. Sanda, talk, if you would, just a minute here about the differences you see, first of all, in children that have access to these structured quality early childhood care education programs and those that do not.
Well, there is ample research done on this topic, and the evidence is overwhelming in that preschool education has lasting effects on the socioeconomic development and achievement of the individuals. It starts with a school readiness for kindergarten and elementary school, but the effects are actually lasting throughout their education and even beyond that. Children engaged in preschool programs score consistently higher on standardized academic tests. They have higher school attendance rate, significantly lower discipline referrals. The children with special needs are particularly affected, and those who benefit from early education are identified for special education earlier, and they're moved to mainstream classes sooner than children who were not in the early education programs. Children engaged in early education use significantly more appropriate behaviors. They were significantly better at social interactions, significantly more emotionally mature than children without early education. And because unfortunately, the US government is not investing a lot of resources into early education, we're not even in the top 50 countries in the world. There is again an economic disparity as children who do benefit from early education tend to come from wealthier families. But even when you control for the socioeconomic disparities and other confounding factors, the achievement gap remains. So moreover, investment in the early education of disadvantaged children pays extremely high returns down the road. It improves not only their cognitive abilities, but also crucial behavioral traits like sociability, motivation, and self-esteem. And studies that have followed children throughout their adult lives confirm enormous payoff for these investments, whether measured in improved access to education, success in college, higher income, or even lower incarceration rates. So the evidence is overwhelming.
Right. Well, I read a UNESCO report, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and they refer to this what COVID has wrought on early childhood education is nothing short of a major health crisis. Precipitated unprecedented, sweeping, and dramatic changes in the lives of children, their families, pre-service and in-service teachers of young children. And worldwide, they note that COVID-19 has also pushed early childhood education the education system to the verge of collapse, mobilizing leading early childhood organizations that now advocate for financial rescue, financial packages to protect. But of course, it all comes down to the toll in the lives of these young people and who are displaced from their environments, their learning environments. So what have you seen in your practice, Dr. Sanda? And then Rich, it's important, I want to hear from you as well, that confirms the effects of this disruption on young children. Mm-hmm. And I'll put up some slides that you were good to share with us, so thank you for that.
Well, as every one of you can attest, COVID has changed our lives. Even more so, the children who, as resilient as they are, have been even more affected, particularly younger children, as they have more immature coping mechanisms. According to a study I ran into the other day, younger children aged 3 to 6 years old were more likely to manifest symptoms of clinginess and fear of family members being infected than older adults, older children. Humans are social creatures. Lack of social interaction, sports, outdoors activities has led to depression, anxiety, particularly agoraphobia, the fear of going outside, obsessive compulsive disorders. And concerningly, even though the rates of this condition has gone up, the access to care has decreased. So looking at the data, there is an apparent paradox, which is according to the national data, the incidence of mental illness has increased. There was an increase in mental health related visits in the emergency room, 24% in 5 to 11 years old and 31% in older kids. So we know they go to the emergency rooms to get care. However, there was a significantly decline in the number of hospitalization as well as the number of referrals for outpatient mental health in children. What it means is that there are a lot of children right now who need mental health, but they are not getting it, neither in the hospital nor in the clinics. So more of them end up in the emergency rooms with severe conditions like suicides, aggression, when it's too late. The reasons are complex. Families are not able to recognize the early signs of the conditions. The school counselors and educators, people who are trained in recognizing them, they are not having consistent access to the children anymore, and other factors. The biggest referral source for mental health programs has always been the school system. So without the schools, these conditions are now going undetected and untreated.
Rich, you went through a wave when there was a severe limits on capacity, and then so you saw the children that that were displaced and had to stay at home. Now they were able to come back. So what have you seen in your teachers? How do they report what the toll has meant, and what's so obvious to you?
Yeah, Greg, I heard from a parent the other day, and so she delivered her baby back in March, right before the pandemic had started. And it was just mind-boggling to be brought up to speed, to be reminded that this child has never been around another child before. And mom's trying to work from home. And I tell this story for a reason. As Dr. Sanda had briefly mentioned, especially in the early years, birth through 12 months is so important. He talked a little bit about responsive care. When a baby cries, they expect to get a response. They expect to be held or get changed or get fed. Seeing the teacher's facial expressions, and if these babies are not being cared by professional educators and teachers that go to school for infant care, most parents don't know how to take care of these babies in this manner. So as they go through the different stages of development and really don't understand how to respond and how to support when these childs are in an accredited program, as I mentioned, these teachers' attention is 100% focused on that child's well-being and their needs. And then, as Dr. Sanda mentioned, then when we have children in our 3-year-old programs where we're really focused on executive functions and learning how to share and problem solve and self-control, this is very difficult for a child to learn when they're not in a proper learning environment or parents are trying to work from home.
Now, if I'm a parent I'm a parent. Fortunately, my children are older now, but if I have a young child, my concern is, okay, so is this long lasting? What are the long-term effects of and the needs that this situation has created in children who've been disrupted at such a critical stage from their learning routine? So Dr. Sanda, I'm going to put up a couple of slides that you again shared with us. If you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah. So the biggest long-term impact is going to be the widening of the socioeconomic gap. Like I mentioned, this is the reason I went into medicine, and I think it's only getting worse with this pandemic. Like I mentioned in the slide before, 17 million children are not able to receive free school lunches right now. This gives us an idea of the magnitude of the problem. 1 in 7 children do not have home internet access, so they're not even getting remote learning and schooling right now. So and like I mentioned before, all the symptoms we're going to see now, the anxiety, the rate of depression, obsessive compulsive traits, agoraphobia, the abuse is something that is particularly concerning because, like I mentioned before, the school system was the system that was picking up on this very subtle signs and symptoms sometimes. And the family, sometimes, you know, the majority of cases, the abuse is done by the family. So the family, of course, is less likely to report this abuse. So I think that the effects, long-lasting and short-term memory, short-term effects are pretty significant at this point.
I mean, a pretty dire situation, very concerning. I know that, Rich, you've expressed your frustration that public health officials don't seem to grasp at times, or haven't consistently throughout this ordeal, that early childhood programs aren't like other businesses that have to deal with the harsh effects of closure. Gyms and movie theaters, restaurants, of course, those are serious. Those who run those establishments, I don't mean to make light of that, the impact of that on them and their livelihoods and their prospects. But it's a different thing when you're talking about children. Again, back to the long-term effects. What do you think? Why do you think there's been a lack of awareness or sense of urgency with regard to keeping young children in school, or providing the financial resources needed to get as many back into school as possible? What's driving that? What don't they get?
I'm not sure, Greg. You know, when this pandemic first started, Governor Hogan deemed preschools as essential to the economy's recovery to ensure that these essential personnel could go back to work, police officers and doctors and nurses. But, you know, he also reduced our classroom capacity, mirroring the restrictions that were in place of group sizing, along with everybody else, not to exceed 10 people in a group. So, you know, when this first started, we were viewed, well, and as we went through the different phases and more people started to return back to work, we were unable really to, because of the restrictions, and to even go back to full capacity, because we were stuck with those group sizes. And this really restricted a lot of parents from going back to work. So when this first started, we were viewed differently because the public schools were closed and we were open. And somehow we were kind of put in that one size fits all. And as time went on and the journey went on, we started to be compared to the public schools. And I had to educate them on the difference of having a school ager versus a toddler. I mean, parents, I have 5 children of my own, and you know, I could still continue to go back to work with school agers, but parents that had infants and toddlers in school age or preschoolers, they were not able to leave their children home, of course. And because of the restrictions, were unable to, because they couldn't get their children back into quality preschools.
Now you're active, I know, with the Maryland State Child Care Association. And they've been pushing, I know, for a seat on the governor's cabinet for the purpose of advocating for early childhood education. Do you think that this situation will now accelerate that, or reorder the priority to make that happen?
I certainly hope so. I think, you know, out of this entire pandemic, I think it proved how important early education, as Dr. Sanda is talking about. I think it really has proven to our parents how important early education is, and really the value that high quality preschools and that these teachers actually provide for our children.
Yeah. I'll ask both of you this, but in the hours after being sworn in on January 20th, President Biden signed an executive order giving direction to the secretaries of education, as well as health and human services, the ability or the mandate to work together to develop evidence-based guidance to assist states and elementary and secondary schools in deciding whether and how to reopen. So that's good news. How to remain open for in-person learning. And then there's special mention in giving is given to mitigating learning loss caused by the pandemic and address the educational disparities and inequities that the pandemic has created and exacerbated. So getting to the solution here, Dr. Sanda and Rich, how in your view can we in fact mitigate the impact of learning loss, the loss of social engagement among the very young children? Is that even possible?
I think there are a few ways we can help. The first step, of course, to change is recognizing there is a problem. We need to increase the awareness of the impact of the learning loss, like having this meeting. So I once again thank you, Greg, for putting this meeting together. Secondly, I think we need to minimize the damage, like you mentioned, putting pressure on our elected officials to get to safely reopen schools and kindergartens as soon as possible. And thirdly, once our children do go back to school, hopefully soon, teachers need to do an individualized assessment of the children's needs. How far behind are they, and develop personalized programs to address these needs. I don't know if the public health, the public school system has these resources. And I'm not an expert in education, but some options might be prolonging the school year or developing summer school programs or some other ideas that maybe Rich can give us a few more ideas.
Yeah, I'm not, it's a tough question, Greg. I mean, as we talked about, I mean, the child's development is a very short window of time that we spoke about. And for most children, that window of time has passed. So there's absolutely, I believe, will be an impact where we're already seeing it in our classrooms. Can we provide additional resources, as Dr. Sanda mentioned, resources for these children? Absolutely. Will there be consequences for the lost time? I believe so, and I believe we're starting to already see those the time lost.
Right. Well, as we know, accessibility is a major issue. I mean, there are those who can afford quality license programs, and then there are those. I know something you were very concerned about, Rich, and advocated in Annapolis about is that without allowing licensed providers to have the capacity that they're accustomed to, many children, for the very fact that the parents have to work, end up dropping their children off in unlicensed facilities, and that creates a whole other set of risks and long-term consequences potentially. Yeah. Let's talk a bit about. I always like to get to solutions. It's one thing to highlight the problem. It's another thing to get to some good practical solutions. The fact is that given the harsh economic impacts of the pandemic, it's the fact that many families are still facing severe economic hardship, and it's just not possible for some parents to send their children to quality childcare programs, as I mentioned. What can you offer them? I'll turn to both of you on this. What should they be doing if their children are at home, recognizing that not every loving and devoted parent is a natural teacher, and it takes a lot, especially if they are working from home themselves. What can you offer them? What should they do? I'll turn to you, Dr. Sanda, and you've shared some slides, so I'll put those up again. And Rich, jump in and join this.
Sure.
So I think these tips are valuable for children, but also for all of us now who found ourselves working from home. It affects both children and the adults. Is what I teach my adult patients in my private practice who are struggling with the new lifestyle of working from home. I think the most important thing is to establish a routine, but at the same time be flexible and allow the freedom for children to learn in a method that works best for them. To set clear expectations of homework and when assignments are due, and try to respect the breaks they would otherwise have if they were in school. And this I teach my adult patients, they tend to blur the lines. When you work from home, you don't take the breaks the way you used to do them when you were in person. You tend to work longer hours because you say, oh, I'm just gonna, finish this project before I'm here anyway. I don't have to go anywhere. Be patient, have fun. Remember, it's an adjustment for the children as well as for yourself. Try to maintain a healthy diet and incorporate physical activity. The children and the parents have been cooped up in the house for a year now. I think it's very important to get out, get some sunshine, and do some physical activities. And of course, get help from the specialists, from the pediatrician, from the healthcare workers, online resources. This is what we have. This is what we need to utilize.
Excellent. Rich, what good advice are you offering? You're a father of 5, so you,
I think
you've got some battle
Sanda,
scars.
And I think I'll tell you, Greg, I founded and started Celebree before I was a dad, and I do believe it made me a better parent. It's definitely challenged me, but I think I'm doing okay. But I think as Dr. Sanda mentioned, I think he mentioned that these kids have to get back in these proper learning environments. And I think that Maryland has been focused on early education for a long time. They have so many programs and resources that support early education, including resources, as you mentioned, for families with lower income. And I think I would break this down in 3 different phases. For preschools like Celebree that need to get back up and running, Maryland has so many programs that help them get back operating. They even have programs that help them get accredited status, which recognize high quality education standard. And the state actually pays these preschools to uphold these accreditation standards. For our teachers or teachers that are considering becoming a teacher, the state will pay for these teachers to get their 2- and 4-year degrees to enter into this field, including their books in early education, and will continue to pay for their CEU courses. And for families with lower income that are looking to get their child in a high quality program, Governor Hogan back in 2018 doubled the Maryland State Scholarship Program, its eligibility for those families that made less than $35,000. He raised that to families to $72,000 for family of 4. So this was really a game changer for a lot of families, especially during these times of families that one of the parents have been laid off, that could also meet that eligibility. So I would go to the MSD website and look for all of these programs and scholarships that may be available for families to get their children back into school, back into a.
And that's Maryland State Department of Education, MSDE, right?
Yes,
that's where it is.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Well, we're at that point when we open it up to our participants, those who have joined us, and so we're delighted to do that now. So I would ask those who are participating to share your video, and then that way I can see you, and you can hold up your hand, or you can send me a note in chat that you have a question, and we'd be happy to take your questions from these 2 foremost experts in early childhood care and development. Aaron, I see you over there. At least you're on the left there of my screen. So go ahead, Aaron. What you have? I'll turn it over to you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, first off, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dr. Sanda and Richie. This has been amazing. Similar to Richie, I have a slew of children as well, with our newest just coming in November. But during the middle to the end of the pandemic, I did notice my children attitudes were changing. Specifically, 2 of them were coming quite depressed. They were getting headaches. I think they were spending around 6 hours a day on the computer. And I looked at my wife, and we made the decision to actually pull them out of the school system's program and put them into a different homeschooling program, which was around 2.5 hours a day or 3 hours a day, and then kicked them out of the house for the remainder of the day to go play with their friends. But they didn't have a lot of friends to play with because their friends were typically still in school or online. But I did see that it helped them a little bit. I am finding that being stuck in the house is causing a little bit of issues. So we try to get outside, but I feel a little bit of guilt because I don't know if it was the right move or not. And I just wanted to pose the question, I think at the end of the day, my children's health and happiness is good, but for them, they're excited to go back to school. They were honor roll students, and they're a little nervous now going back and readjusting back to what school is going to be like. And I'm just trying to figure out if that was a right move or how I can make sure to keep them on the same path.
Who wants to take that one?
Well, I think these are very personal decisions we all have to make. I made a similar one when I decided to hold back my older in kindergarten. He's born in April, so he was even though he did well academically from a behavioral point of view, he wasn't quite where we wanted him to be. So I read a lot of studies, and the behavioral psychologists who recommended to hold your child back a year, and it's called yellow shirting, right? So again, we made that decision, and I think he's better for it. So we're only gonna know in many years from now if that was the right decision or not. We do what we think is best for our children right now. But you mentioned, Aaron, they were clearly struggling. So I think something has to happen. And they are lucky to have somebody who is in tune and pays attention to their emotions and their feelings and their mood. And you did something about it. So I think more power to you for doing that.
Thanks. Makes me feel better.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
I would also, Aaron, commend you for that, because I sat there and watched my 5 children struggle and a lot with it, and just the lack of engagement, the lack, and in all fairness, I saw it on the teacher side too. These teachers were really struggling with keeping children engaged. It was. I believe it was a lose-lose for both sides. I believe it was a losing battle for our teachers in the public school system, and I believe it was a losing battle for the majority of children.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. All the best. Next question. Next question. Don't be shy. On the point about, I'm waiting for somebody to raise their hand or indicate. On that point, Rich, have you seen many teachers that were sidelined now leave the childcare field or go on to other things? Is that an effect as well?
Well, you have to remember, Greg, I mean, we never closed our schools.
Right.
So we remained open during the entire pandemic. Of course, our enrollment did drop. Of course, we did have to let teachers go. But I'm proud to say that 80% of our teachers returned back in our classrooms once the enrollment started. And it was totally it was totally on the different phases that the governor put us through. And we're, I think, you asked if there's a silver lining in this pandemic. We are right now starting to see what we would normally see back in January of 2020. There's a lot of parents that are going back to work. Children are returning back to preschool. And as we mentioned shortly, these parents realize that they cannot work from home. These children need to be in a proper learning environment. And when they bring their children back into care and see the difference between the children that never left these environments, as Dr. Sanda mentioned, there's a noticeable difference.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Dr. Sanda, is it something is the U.S. unique? You're originally from Bucharest, and
yes.
You have maybe a broader perspective. Of course, it's a numbers thing here, but how are we doing? You already indicated we're not in the top 50.
Yeah.
Key metrics.
in most countries in European Union, there is a lot of government support for preschool, for early education. And yeah, I think it starts there, but it affects the ability of parents to go back to school, to go back to work sooner. It improves the education of the children. So I wish there would be done more about that. Otherwise, we see, because the good education, it's expensive in the United States, unfortunately. So we see this gap in socioeconomic status of parents who some of them are able to put their children through good school and good educations, and others who struggle. So this gap is only widening with each generation that's passing.
Yeah. Well, there's
Greg, Greg, one of the good things, one of the things that we are seeing right now, especially during this time of year, with all the new safety procedures that we've put in place, with taking the temperatures in the lobbies before the children enter into the schools, we're catching a lot of illnesses that we would normally have this time of year. We're catching them well in advance. So as Dr. Sanda could probably relate to, strep throat and a lot of other illnesses that we would normally see at this time of year, we're catching them well in advance. And the doctors are actually said, we're strep throat, this is, is so well before a child or parent would normally bring their children into the doctor's office. We're catching some of these illnesses quite fast. So, it's really become a safer environment, I would say, than normally this time of year, because we're able to catch it so much earlier.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to bring up the mask, which unfortunately they became a political subject. We are seeing a significant decrease in the number of flu cases and all the viruses that are transmitted either by airborne or droplets. The incidence of flu and common cold, all of this are like historic lows. And it's all because of people are wearing the mask and they're protecting, because of the COVID-19. But along with this, talking about the silver lining, a lot of health benefits are brought in by just simply wearing the mask.
I've often thought that the mask may be around for quite a while, just because people begin to realize, for that very reason. If you go to Tokyo, if you go to certain places, and the mask is a very just the normal thing. If somebody's sick, they wear a mask to protect others. And when you consider what you're exposing yourself to, that's they think twice before you put it away eventually. Questions here from our participants. We've got a little time left here. Okay, I see my friend Alvin Katz is here. Alvin, you're hiding from us. There he is. Hey, Alvin. We can't hear you.
Hi guys, Greg, Richard, how you doing, Doctor?
Hi, Greg. Hey, Alvin.
Hey, Alvin.
Mike, I know everybody on the top row here. Aaron, how you doing?
Now,
I've got no children at home. I have my grandchildren are all grown except for two of them. They're my the two youngest ones are 11 and 13, and they are at a private school, and they're doing a combination of home study as well as going to class, and it seems to be working satisfactorily at best, but it seems to be working satisfactorily. By the way, the scene behind me is not where I am. It's just
yeah, I was going to ask. That's a good one. I like the waves are rolling.
I do too. That's why I'm using the scene.
No,
I'm looking out the window of my apartment at Slade Avenue at Suburban Country Club, which is across the street, and they've installed palm trees and a beach.
Well, I have a 18-year-old son who's finishing senior year, just recently resumed partially the same thing, 2 days a week in person and the rest at home. So you think of these poor kids, you know, all that they're missing, you know, that makes that last year in particular so special.
I have found it interesting with our two granddaughters, the two youngest. They both go to Garrison Forest, but they are involved in all kinds of sports. And the sports, I don't think it's through the school, but they both girls play lacrosse. They play field hockey, whatever. I guess it's field hockey, and those activities have been continuing. I mean, one of my granddaughters played lacrosse yesterday.
Yeah.
Which amazed me, especially since it's winter time.
Yeah, but Dr. Sanda, on that point, did you see? I mean, we're focusing on very young children, just because their development, it's exponential, their development at that stage. But I'm sure you also deal with older children, right?
Yeah.
Those in high school and certainly elementary school, high school.
So there is a size effect. So, you know, like in any, you know, early detection and prevention are always important. So the earlier you can apply an intervention, the better it is. And the later you wait for it to develop, the worse it gets. And it's this, you know, with children and middle schoolers and high schoolers, you know, as they get older, they are becoming stronger, and they have better coping mechanisms on how to deal with all the stressors. So I think you're right to focus on the early development, because that's where there is the biggest impact and the biggest bang for your buck if you were to intervene, if you were to make an investment. Yeah, but talking about, you know, you all mentioned, you know, how it seems that the private school systems have been able to adjust better to this environment. I think they are more flexible. They're able to kind of individualize approach to their specific age group and patient population. And I think one of the frustrating parts for me was that, you know, Baltimore County tried this one size fits all or nothing across the entire county, which is huge and it's so diverse. So, you know, I was hoping to see more of that, because I too have friends who have their children in private schools, and they didn't miss a bit. Just like Rachel was saying, you know, it was business as usual. Their children did not get sick. They followed the precautions, and they were very little affected by all this.
Yeah.
Just to add to a little bit, maybe I'm changing the subject a little bit, but I'm just curious, any observations on college kids? I have one grandson who's 20, about to turn 21. He's at the University of Maryland, and he was at College Park, and now he's at home in Baltimore doing everything. And he and his girlfriend both are doing everything virtually. And then I got 5 grandkids who are range in age from 24 to 25, and they're all working. And they're all working virtually, including one granddaughter who's a yoga instructor, but she's doing that virtually. And they seem to be managing satisfactorily, again, to say the least. The 2 at the University of Maryland, my grandson and his girlfriend, they seem to be managing. But what are you finding with kids who are in college? You didn't talk about that level, I don't believe, to any degree.
Yeah, I think they are the most exposed patient population, only because they are at the age where social interactions are key in their development, right? That's when they start developing relationships, and we all know how tough high school was, right? Like you need to kind of put yourself in the social hierarchy. So the social interactions are very important. So that's why we saw on the news all this, you know, outbreaks of the virus among the colleges on campuses, because, you know, they're going to be adolescents. They're going to still go to parties. They're going to still gather, and, you know, it's very little you can do about it. So we did see a lot of, you know, increase in the COVID-19 infection rates among that patient population. But luckily, you know, it doesn't affect them. Again, with age, the earlier, you know, the less deadly this virus seems to be. So young adults, you know, very low mortality rate, and very high infection rates because of their social interactions.
Yeah, I have a 24-year-old granddaughter. She's a business manager for actually a YouTube business. And she did get it. She and the people she works with got it, but fortunately it was a very mild case, as you described, Doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Alan, it amazes me of all these grandkids when you're only 45 years old.
It is amazing, isn't it? And I don't look that. I only look like I'm 85 years old. I'm not that old.
Well, it's just good to see, Alvin. We don't see each other as much anymore with not being at the Center Club. But
that'll get corrected.
sure. Yeah. Well, we and is there another? If there's not, is there another question? Anybody? We've got a couple minutes here left in our time allotted for this this edition of CenterView. Don't be shy. Seize the moment. I don't know. I don't see. It's a shy group this time. Usually it's they're flying. They go over sometimes. Well, I want to thank you both for your time and for the insights you bring. It's certainly among the most critical issues we face and which has been exposed. Here is now coming into well over a year with this pandemic. And so thank you for what you do and for the awareness you're bringing, and more importantly what you're doing on both fronts in the classroom, also at MedStar, Dr. Sanda, to deal with these and help these families and help these young people overcome all that this has caused. I would invite you all to mark your calendars for next month's. We try to do it at the end of the month, if not the last Monday of each month. When we'll welcome Terry Freeman, who is the newly appointed director of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. She has just taken up that post, and so we look forward to welcoming her to Baltimore and to this CenterView discussion during Black History Month. So thank you. Thanks again to our guests, Richard Huffman and Dr. Corneliu Sanda. It's a pleasure, and we'll certainly be in touch. And to all of you, be safe, be well, stay masked, wash your hands, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Great, Doctor.
Thank you. Bye-bye.